So welcome to the book launch of The Song That Sings Us. I'm going to start by handing straight to Penny Thomas from Firefly, and then we are going to have a wonderful evening together. But Penny first.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Yes, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening on what is the first song day, the launch of The Song That Sings Us by Nicola Davies, with beautiful artwork by Jackie Morris. I haven't really prepared anything because I'm just so excited to introduce this book to you that there's not really anything I can prepare. It's been quite a long journey, I think, since Nicola I can't remember how she let me know that she had a book she wanted to write. And would I like it? And I had a first chapter, and this was, what, 3 years ago, Nicola? Something like that. And I said, yes, great, okay, fine. And it's had, I think, 3 titles since then, several evolutions, but that first chapter has actually stayed almost exactly the same. I think it's exactly the same. And the whole vision was there, and it was so exciting and so beautiful. And for about 2 years, I didn't have anything else. And then this year, it's just been an absolute whirlwind since we received the finished manuscript, and we decided we couldn't wait, and we brought it forward. And Nicola said, what about a cover from Jackie Morris? I said exactly what I was thinking. So thank you, Jackie. You've made it look absolutely stunning, and the internal artwork is beautiful as well. I'm sure you've seen some of these on Twitter already, but it looks lovely. It's an epic, it's thrilling, it's visionary. These words you'll have seen everywhere already. I haven't really got any better ones. It's an adventure story. It's a song, and it doesn't sit on the fence about what's happening to this world, but a completely different world, obviously. So I mean, there's a message, but there's a wonderful story. There are wonderful characters, and I'm sure you're going to hear a bit more about them this evening. Yeah, we're delighted at Firefly Press that we've got the chance to publish this. So thank you, both of you.
Thanks, Penny.
And we have to say thank you, I think, right at the outset to Firefly for having the vision to publish this book, and how grateful we are to them for that. Before we start, everyone, if you haven't been along to a book launch that we've hosted before, just a few technical things. We hope to have some time at the end for question and answer. If you would like to pose a question to Nicola and or Jackie, then please use the Q&A, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. Don't use the chat, because we won't be trawling through the chat to look for questions. You can use that to be social with each other and to comment and to reflect on the things that are being talked about. So it's the Q&A for posing any questions that you have as we go through, and I'll keep an eye on that, and hopefully we'll have time for some at the end. But first of all, I'm going to keep my introductions brief this evening. It's not because I have nothing to say about Nicola Davies and Jackie Morris, but because I don't want to waste minutes when they have so many precious words and images to share with us. But I do want to say a few words. I don't know whether you remember, Nicola, but I first met you many years ago at a publisher's party. I think it was in the gardens at Chelsea. And it was in the early days of your writing for children. I was blown away then by your positive energy and your joie de vivre. You dance like you live. And of course, you've gone on to produce some of the very, very best books for children, educating them and every one of us here about the natural world. When I hear you read your work aloud, as I know you're going to this evening, it reaches deep inside and it touches my soul. Oh, for goodness sake. It does.
That's it tonight, Nikki, don't worry.
Because I know that the words come from a place of truth and of wonder. And that same unaffected love of the natural world is matched by Jackie Morris's sublime artwork, which is so beautifully rendered that each painting demands that you not only look, but you also see her subjects, as if you're seeing them for the very first time. Together you are a tour de force, and we're going to have a very special evening. So
Tour de
let's
force.
get down to business. Congratulations to both of you. We've been eagerly anticipating Song Day and it's here. So to begin, Nicola, perhaps we could start with you and you could introduce this story in your own words.
Oh, right. Okay. So it's fat. That's one thing to say. Paul Penny. I think Paul Penny had absolute
Wait,
heart.
it is as long as it needs to be, and every word has earned its place there.
Well, that's kind of what I said, but you know, initially 105,000 words is enough to give a publisher heart failure. It is set in another world that has common features with our own. But the emphasis of this other world, the culture of this other world, has historically been one of really paying attention to nature, really valuing nature and not exploiting it. But at the start of this book, there are other forces, which I call the automators, who are beginning to take the opposing view, who want to be able to exploit the natural world without check or scruple. In this world, there are some people who have the power not to talk to animals, but to listen in on their thoughts and to tune in on their desires and their priorities. And that has fed into the culture of this world. But of course, it's in direct opposition to what the automators want. The automators absolutely do not want anybody to listen to the thoughts of other creatures or listen to what they might have to say. So they have outlawed this power, which puts the three protagonists of the story immediately in jeopardy, because the younger twins, Ash and Zeno, are in possession of this power of Siadu, I've called it, or they are listeners. Their elder sister is not, but their elder sister has been raised by their mother, who has a previous history as a freedom fighter, to protect her two younger children. But they've been hiding away in the mountains for years. Somehow, the automators have found them. And at the start of the story, the very start of the story, their mountain home is under attack, and the three children must effect an immediate escape. They're all three of them very, very skilled snowboarders. And they leave the house, they leave the mother defending the house and drawing the fire of the automators, and they start to snowboard down a very, very dangerous gully. But they are pursued by the servants of the automators, which are creatures, half animal, half machine, in the form of falcons, huge falcons that are chasing them down the side of this mountain. So that's how the story begins. And I'll read a little bit of that section in a second. But I really wanted to create a story that was incredibly exciting, that had lots and lots of action, lots and lots of jeopardy, and you got very little rest from that sense of the story driving forwards. And the places where the story does rest, because they're so few and far between, offered me an opportunity to put little moments of reflection in, and allowed me to deliver messages in the story that I hope will hit home in those moments of quiet, because you don't get very many of them. Actually, most of the time, kind of.
Absolutely. I think we're going to hear. We're going to get a flavour of both aspects of the writing, aren't we, this evening? But I think you could take us into a reading now, having set the story up for us.
So as I've said, oh, thank you, a little bit more might be lovely. So as I've said, it's at the start of the story. Ash, Zeno and Harlan are snowboarding down this mountainside in the moonlight, in the dark, and they're being pursued by these huge falcons. The birds of prey are huge, and very fast. Harlan's never seen falcons so big or willing to fly in moonlight. They're strange and menacing and very clearly chasing Ash and Zeno. The birds stoop, full of malevolent intent. Their dark bodies dive like missiles, wings part folded like the fletching of a giant arrow. The air is fractured by their speed. There's a flash of yellow eyes, of outstretched talons, more like steel daggers. Harlan screams a warning, and Zeno lets out a high-pitched cry of shock. She ducks, and one falcon skims her head and wheels around for another pass. Ash hasn't been so lucky. The other bird has raked him with a claw, and there's a dark line of blood across his cheek. Trees, Harlan yells, into the trees. Ash and Zeno understand at once. Close-packed trees clothe this section of the slope to the left of the gully. To snowboard between them at this speed, in moonlight, is insane, but it's the only way to lose the pursuit of the birds. Falcons are built for high speed in open country, not for fast changes of direction in the enclosed space of dense woodland. Moonlight, deep shadow, tree trunks come at the speeding borders in a high velocity tangle. Every microsecond could smash any one of them into the tree. Everything seems to get faster and faster, more disjointed. Senses, muscles, joints are close to overload, and still the birds pursue them. Look out! Ash yells a warning. One falcon is coming straight for the side of Harlan's face. But the bird is so focused on its target, it only looks where its feet will strike. Harlan jinks sideways, scrapes the tree trunk with the edge of her board, and the falcon's left wing smashes into the trunk. There's a snap, loud as a rifle, and the bird shatters into a floundering mess of feathers. Ash and Zeno crow with delight, and then Zeno screams. Harlan sees her shoot past, flashing between the trees, with the other falcon's foot tangled in her hood. Zeno swats at it in panic, trying to keep her balance on the slope, trying to avoid the trees. She rips the hood away and swirls it round. Too late, the falcon realizes its mistake. Zeno smashes it into a passing tree and its head explodes. By then, the children are 100 feet further on, speeding ever faster through the trees, and like the birds, too focused on what's just in front of them to see the bigger picture. By the time Harlan registers the end of the trees, they're all in the air. They have shot out over the lip where the slope of trees becomes sheer rock face and are now falling. Harlan is aware of the quiet as they fall. She has time to see the moon setting behind the mountains, the stars, the shapes of her brother and sister against the indigo sky, against the dull pearl of the snow. Oh, she thinks, we're going to die. Well, obviously they don't, because that's like...
They don't. They've got another how many 100 pages to go, so they definitely don't. But they kind of, there's a very short breathing space before they find themselves in yet more danger. I wanted to ask you, because I know it's hard sometimes to remember the beginnings and the genesis of stories, but in as much as you can remember, I wondered where all the different strands came from and when you first started to realise that what you had here was a story.
I think it's with those characters. The snowboarding sequence came out of talking to my husband before he was my husband, when we first got together, and he was talking to me. He snowboarded a lot, and he was talking to me about snowboarding. And I've never done it, but I've skied. And it put me back into that environment of the mountain. And somehow the characters in that place, I saw them in that place. And I didn't know why they were there. And it took me a while to work out why they were there. I had at the very start the idea that I wanted to write about animals being able to communicate in some way with humans. but I really shied away from it for a long time because so many children's stories feature talking animals. And, you know, the Disney version of that is just, as we know, completely nauseating. You know, everything comes with a sick bag. They're really just little humans in animal suits. And horrible. So I didn't want to do that. So I really wanted to try and do something that kind of imagined what it would really be like to be inside the mind of an animal, and how completely incomprehensible that might be, unless, of course, the animal decided that it wanted to communicate with you. And then there might be an ability to meet halfway, because, but just like two human beings trying to communicate without a common language, that was always going to be tricky. So I thought a lot about that. And then I thought about who might want that not to happen. And as soon as I'd had that thought of who might want that not to happen, who would want humans not to talk to animals, then the whole kind of capitalist edifice came into quite sharp focus.
I remember, though, when you first started talking about it, you were talking about speakers. Yeah. The speakers was one of the first titles, but then it switched not to being about speaking, but about listening.
Yeah, about listening, and sometimes not understanding. And that transition was quite important to the story. But with everything, all the fiction that I write, and actually quite a lot of the non-fiction as well, because that's quite fictiony, I start with an image. I see something, I see a character, and I don't really know exactly what's going to happen in the story. I have a broad shape of it and a kind of idea of an ending, and I knew there was going to be whale song in it, but I didn't know until I started to write. And I always discover the story as I'm writing. So I'll wake up in the middle of the night, or at the moment I'm thinking about the sequel, and I'm beginning to know things about that just by thinking about it. I kind of working it out. It doesn't feel like writing a story. It's like sort of like research, really, or just looking a bit harder at something and seeing it a bit better.
Really interesting.
It was quite funny as Nick was reading it to us, and we'd go, "Oh my God, that's genius! What you've done there!" And she was going, "No, it wasn't me. It wasn't me that made that happen." We're like,
it does feel like that. It does. It does feel like the characters are doing things in front of my head, and I just got to watch. It's the experience of writing for me is very, very, very filmic. I see it happening, and I describe it, and then sometimes I can't work out why something's happened, and then I kind of see it from another angle, and they're like, oh yeah.
So interesting. And maybe we'll come back to filmic, because that's part of something that I wanted to ask you. But while we're talking about how things begin and how they take shape, this book has, in your words, 3 midwives. Now, this is quite unusual for a way of writing, so I think you do need to tell us a little bit more about that process.
Well, normally in my working life, well, it's the same for Jackie too, we have little patches of peace to work in between, school visits and this and that and festivals, and there's loads of different things all going on at once. And I usually have in a normal year, I would have between 3 and 7 books on the go. But partly due to lockdown and partly due to a decision on my part to finally write something a bit longer and to change my working pattern, I got rid of the noise. And at the same time as I was getting rid of the noise and clearing the space, we entered a global pandemic. And we moved to Pembrokeshire, sort of 5 miles away from where we're sitting now in Jackie's kitchen. And so during lockdown, Jackie and our lovely, lovely, beloved friend Kath, who's maybe out there somewhere, Kath, she's in Australia, and Kath's delicious daughter, who's just around the corner here, Molly, were in our bubble and were my first audience. I have never before read in that way. I mean, Jackie and I quite often, we're each other's first audience quite often.
Yeah.
Jackie, you ring me up and say, can I read you something? And I'll do the same. But not quite in this way. It was like, it felt a bit like Dickens writing it episodically, you know, writing for a weekly paper, because I had a regular slot, and I knew that by the next Tuesday or Wednesday, whenever it was, I had to have the next bit ready. And actually, that was great.
So I think lockdown had kind of, the first lockdown had just finished, and so we could, in our bubble, get together, share food together. It was fantastic.
So exciting.
And Nick said, oh, can I just bring over the start of this to read? And we were like, oh yeah, brilliant. I was thinking, yes. And so we sat and we listened, and as the weeks went on, sometimes we could do that, sometimes we had to do it virtually. Kathy and Molly were living here, so Nick would read to us over FaceTime. I remember one time when we were all in the kitchen, and it was a really exciting bit with the Gula, and Molly was just sat like this with her hands over her eyes because she couldn't bear to watch because the words were so visual. But oh my word, it was our one marker. You know, that time was really strange, wasn't it? The weeks were very peculiar, and that was our real island that we looked forward to every week, was this ongoing story. And as a story, Nick would weave it back and forwards, because sometimes things would happen and you have to go back and edit. And so
did it change the process for you as a writer in any way?
It didn't really change the process, but what it changed was my ability to believe in my story. My problem is always, as I'm sure it is for many writers, especially many female writers, is maintaining self-belief for long enough to finish something. You know, everybody gets to that place 20,000 words in, or a third of the way in, wherever that is, thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. It's too far from the start. I don't know where the ending is. I've lost my rudder. I thought
it was a really good idea.
I thought it was a really good idea. And
whatever was I thinking?
You get to that place. Everybody gets to that place, but I get to that place in absolute flipping spades. And it got me through.
Just before publication day.
Just before. But it absolutely got me through. Having this audience, you know, not just of, you know, my beloved colleagues who know how it is, but Molly, who, you know, who was just reacting as a reader, was really, really fantastic. Seeing the story work, seeing the words do what I wanted them to do. There
was one thing that I had to phone you up, didn't I? I had to phone up, because Nicola is evil. She is pure evil. She's a killer.
Oh, can't you just tell? No.
No, she's a vicious killer. And I phoned her up and I said,
don't mention the rat, that's all.
No, I'm not going to mention the rat. I said, I know what you're planning. And do you know what that will do to Molly? You can't kill. Can I say which character it is?
No, you can't. You can't
do that. And I think did it change? Because I don't think it changed because of that.
It just made me, I had thought about playing with killing that character, but I think I'd already decided it couldn't be done.
So I pretended that she couldn't do it because Molly would be upset.
Everybody needs to know, Jackie, of course, you would not have been at all upset by it. I do want to ask you, we've talked about the human, we've talked about the human characters. Tell us a little bit more about the animal characters, the main animal characters.
And I wanted them to play a real part in the action and to have real relationships with the humans. So I had to kind of wind my zoological neck in a bit and let them be a bit anthropomorphized. But what I don't know, well, you know, I'm making assumptions about what they think.
But your assumptions about what they think are based on a lifetime of learning about how animals behave.
Yeah.
So they're not. It's an imagining of what it feels like to be a gula, what it feels like to be a tiger.
Sure.
And knowing, you know, how tigers are born, how they eat, where they live, how they move. Same, you know, you researched wolverines, you know, whereas many people just look at the shape of an animal and then give it a human character.
Yeah, and I absolutely didn't didn't do that. I made them as much themselves as they could be. And actually that was a really, really powerful thing, because I found out things about how those relationships worked through approaching it in that way. And those characters for me became, I mean, all my characters feel real when I'm writing, but they felt something very, 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 very close to my heart. And also then they allowed me to deliver some of the messages that I wanted to deliver in the story in a way that would have been impossible if I just had the point of view of human characters.
We're going to hear another reading. You're going to read some of Encalamba's voice, but you better tell us who Encalamba is, or what Encalamba
is. She's an elephant. She's a forest elephant. If she was in our world, she would be an East African forest elephant. And she's very old and wise and clever. Elephant brains are extraordinary. They're obviously bigger than ours, but they are bigger in different ways. The areas of elephant brains that are very well developed are very different from ours. So their way of thinking is very, very different. But everything we know about them tells us that they are deeply, deeply social and deeply intelligent, deeply aware, with very strong sense of self and consciousness. So this is part of Encalamba's voice. It is raining, the wetness falling, dripping from the leaves, making secret pathways to the river. Water has its own thoughts, no being may oppose. Water tells its thoughts to every wrinkle of my skin, and my skin is very great and very wrinkled. My skin hears the thoughts that travel in veins of trees, my sisters. My skin hears the thoughts that water brought down from the clouds. These thoughts have traveled from the far off blue, the blue that is the great grandmother of the land, and in her live her swimming children. I will never see them, the tiny ones more in number than the leaves, or the great ones bigger even than my kind. But the clouds bring to me the echo of their singing, thoughts and being. Through the rain, I know them. Through the rain, I know many things. In all things, there are voices. The raindrops in the river, the ocean into cloud, the leaves fallen on the forest floor, the sand made rock and sand again, the blood, the bone, the muscle and the skin, the wood, the sap, the petal and the seed, the mushroom veins that lace together life and death, connected one to another in a long singing, singing, singing that holds all life as one. Without the life, there is no singing. Without the singing, there is no life. So there are only two, in fact, sections, short sections in the book like that, that where the animals speak for themselves. And there are a couple of other places where the human characters make a sudden and to them rather unexpected and clear connection with the mind of an animal, and you see for a moment through the eyes of that animal, through its experience, through its memory, through its very different senses.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do it very much because I know that kind of enriched language is it's like chocolate mousse, you know, you can only take just so much of it. But I really wanted to use it, and to use it to punctuate the story and give it a different flavor and a different pace, and also to give my readers a moment to kind of step back and reflect and think and connect.
I've got a question for you that relates directly to that. There's a quotation here from the book where it says, "Everything sings layers of meaning that Harlan can sense, but that will not fit into any part of her mind that uses words." And yet that's exactly what you're doing in writing a novel. You're reaching for a meaning beyond words. Is that how you see it?
I've thought a lot about this, and particularly recently with researching and getting my brain into the right place to write the sequel. It interests me very much how words shape our thinking, and there are various academic theories about whether that is the case or not. But it seems to me that from my perspective as a very word-based life form, there are thoughts that words allow you to think and articulate. And there may be thoughts that I can't think and articulate because I am a word-based life form. But of course, because I'm using words, I have to operate within that constraint. But what I hope is that my words, particularly that kind of enriched poetic language, because that's what poetry does, doesn't it? Poetry makes you feel things, makes you feel those layers of experience, recognize those layers of experience represented in the words. But the words aren't the whole story. The words aren't everything. They're just the highlights or the lowlights that allow you to see the whole picture, because you feel that picture is there. And what the words do is the words just press the right buttons. You know, that's what you're doing as a writer, and why reading is such an extraordinary thing. Is what you're doing is you're going right inside your readers' brains,
touching minds,
and you're using what's in there. And what's in there is different for everybody. So for everybody, the experience of a story, the way the circuit of a story completes, you know, writer, book, reader, is different every time, because the reader is different, and what's inside the reader's brain is different, and the buttons that you're pressing inside the reader's brain with your words are slightly different.
And of course, this is an ideal. Sorry, Jackie.
I love those chocolate mousse bits, because I love the spaces between the words and reading between the lines, and I think that's what poetry does and gives you. I like it when things are not spelled out, so you have to kind of taste it. The synesthesia of reading is the joy for me, really. And there's so much of it. It's a respect that a writer gives to a reader when everything is spelled out and there's nothing left to do, and it's all laid out before you, and it tells you how to think, and the life is taken out of something.
For me, that's an act of I'm going to say something a bit inflammatory here. That kind of writing is an act of arrogant possession. And I don't want to be arrogant or possessive about my stories. I want, once they're out in the world, they're not, that's yours. You put yourself in it, and use it in your mind and your heart and your soul in the way that you want to. That's fine. That's, for me, that's the point. I don't want to write something that can only be seen one way.
Yeah, we've got lots of things that we want to talk about, and I want to say that actually words are one way of experiencing the story, images are another, and I think it would be lovely to have a look at some of Jackie's artwork, and to hear from you a little bit about how you were responding and what you were doing with your visual response to this. So let me just get some of these up onto screen for us to have a look at. I've only got a couple that Nicola sent to me earlier. I just wanted to include that because that's so lovely.
What? Right,
what you were showing me now. That was signing the proof copies at my house.
Right. How about?
So lovely.
One of the things I could say while that one's up is I've discovered through a friend of mine called Catherine Hyde, who gave me a very small square of clayboard, this new medium to paint on, and the black and whites in this are sumi ink, which I grind myself, then painted, used like watercolor on clayboard, and also scratched into. And the color, then the part of the thing with the starling, it really shows on the cover because it's been gloss laminated. The white of the clayboard allows those colors to really shine through. This is one of the hardest books I've ever worked on because I'm quite fond of Nicola Davies, really. And when it's not, I hope Rob's not listening. It's not that I like Nicola more, but we have known each other for almost a quarter of a century, which is quite a long time. And this is the first time that we have worked together, trying to make a book jacket that did honor to the work that's inside and caught the eye. I just felt quite a bit of pressure, really. It was so hard. But also, you know, I loved the story so much, still do. I've read it a couple of times. I'm looking forward to reading it as a book because I love the shape of books. A proof is one thing, but, you know, the colour version is wonderful. And Firefly have thrown everything at this book. It's just, the cover looks great. The way the laminate is on there. If you've got your own copy, then take the cover off, and underneath there is quite a lovely bit of what's it called, foiling on the jacket case. And the spine looks beautiful. It's an attention to detail, you know. It's great.
It's delicious.
And I do love an end paper.
Delicious.
I think you could wear that, really.
Yeah, I'd love to wear that.
So I wasn't so much illustrating it because the words paint pictures in your eyes. I would never draw the main characters because I think everybody has an image of what they look like. In my mind, they are black, the kids.
Yeah, they're mixed race.
I don't know why, but they just are. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't see Doda quite so strongly, but he has a bit of a skull of a face.
He looks like Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I wonder why.
He is in fact Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yeah. So I wouldn't want to draw the main characters apart from Scrimsley, who I just want to paint and paint and paint. Because I think you need to leave the space for the reader to imagine their own. And once you have Harry Potter, every Harry Potter looks like that Harry Potter. That's the trouble with films, I think. Yeah. They spell out too much for you. Yeah, so I don't know what I can say, really. It's just a great privilege to work on a book like that, but also terrifying, utterly terrifying.
Quite a few things that for us to think about in terms of, you know, not just the plot of the story and how it's written, but the sorts of things. Oh, look, your cat's joining us.
It's Lady Spitfire. She may well jump on Nick's back in a minute and then jump on the cupboard.
The children's mother who dies fairly. Oh, the children's mother who doesn't appear in the rest of the story.
Yeah.
says she has a mantra, and she says, don't think about what you can change, focus on what you can. And as that was repeated, you know, I was thinking about some of the challenges. Obviously, this is real world challenge. And I just wondered, it's a very pragmatic view, and Harlan puts it into practice when she has to make an assessment in the moment about whether to save her brother or look for her sister. And this mantra comes to mind. So she's very, very pragmatic. And so I just wanted to ask you whether you feel that we need to be more pragmatic and less sentimental in how we try to address some of the challenges that we're faced with.
I think there's a certain amount of triage that needs to go on in all crisis situations. I suppose that idea of changing what's in front of you, changing what you can, and just forgetting about what you can't, is a way of focusing on what's right in front of you right now, and sometimes not thinking about the bigger picture. Because at the moment, with climate change, it's very, very easy for everybody to feel overwhelmed, and to feel that if you can't do everything, then you can do nothing. But of course, that's not true. If everybody does a bit, if everybody does the bit that they can that's in front of them, and then the next bit that they can that's in front of them, and the next bit and the next bit. I remember when I was first in secondary school, and I was very, very keen to work hard and succeed, because I knew that academic success was my way out, was my passport to freedom. That's how I saw it. But I found organising my time and doing lots and lots of homework. I did 3 science A-levels, really, really difficult. And I would procrastinate flipping endlessly and not get it done. And then I learnt the trick of doing what's in front of you now. And then when that's done, doing the next bit. And when that's done, doing the next bit. There's an amazing American environmentalist whose name, of course, completely escapes me at the moment, and the exact content of this quote also, but I've quoted it a lot. He made a speech, he made this fantastic speech about just doing the work of planet mending. Completely ignore all the people who say it's impossible, ignore all the people who say you can't do it. Just get down, get your head down and get on with it. And when you're done, then look up and see where the people who said you couldn't do it are.
Interesting. Yeah.
I don't want to say be unsentimental, because I'm fabulously sentimental. I'm a terrible crybaby, and I'm always bursting into tears over the slightest thing. But I think when it comes to hand-wringing and despair on the environmental front, we really do have to be pretty stiff-spined, actually, because hand-wringing and despair not going to get anybody anywhere. Just get on, do the bit, crack on and do the bits that's in front of you that you can do.
And while we're talking about getting things done, something else that I think is really embedded within the story are some crucial ideas about finding your allies, people who can make a difference. I think it's highly significant that Harlan saves the ensign Tolly, who would certainly have imprisoned her or done worse. She sort of recognises within her a potential for change in that moment, in that instant. And then there is a part later on where she says, I'll burn off my number and then I'll be on the right side of the argument. Yeah. And I wanted to contrast that with, the greedy owners of corporations who don't want to relinquish their hold on power. And the big machine in the forest seems to be quite emblematic of that power. And another quote here, the mind inside the machine is too shriveled in hate to hold such a big and generous thought. We do have to think about who we're trying to talk to and what's going to make a difference, don't we?
the point for me about that moment when Harlan, almost in spite of herself, makes a decision to save Tolly. It's not that she sees any potential in Tolly at that point. She doesn't. She recognizes in herself that she is too decent, that she can't. She can't,
just knows it's wrong to kill.
She knows it's wrong. She knows
Yeah.
that she has to put her arms around this person and save them. She has to do it. And actually,
you can't win by being like your enemy.
You can't win by being like your enemy, but if you are like your enemy, you lose anyway. You know, which is why I say, try, do what's in front of you. Don't despair. But if we're going to go down, the most important thing is that we go down with the right spirit in our hearts, trying to do the right thing.
And I think creativity is far more powerful than hatred. If you can maintain yourself in this world, and not give in to hate. And it's hard, because when you see what some people are doing, the frustration that you feel inside, when you see how those people hold the narrative and pump out the news at people and fill them with this, well, it's too late anyway, so there's no point in bothering, when the goals that are given to people to achieve are just so sad and slight. When people like Greta, who stand up for a planet, are ridiculed by ignorant white men in white houses, it does make you angry. But it's far better to turn whatever talent you have towards creative, positive change, I think.
Yeah. And what Harlan finds is that Tolly does have good qualities, and that they're not so different. And I think that's a really, really important thing too, is that it's it's very, very easy with social media to live in your own little echo chamber. But you do have to try and see why the people who don't agree with you, where they're coming from, and what their priorities are, and what their constraints and fears are. I mean, there is you're not going to win the argument with a climate change denier. You're not going to win the argument, because it's a matter of faith. It's a matter of what they believe and what you believe. But what you can do is try and make some other sort of connection, so that at least you can see each other as human beings, and that's a start.
I wanted something we talked about this morning at great length and with great vigour and energy. Was this thing that I seem to recall talking to you about a while ago, where you were saying you wanted to be more involved in activism, as though somehow that wasn't something that you had done hitherto. And I know Jackie was on the same page as me, because she jumped in really quickly with a comment on that.
I in the past, I've done, I've marched and I've protested and I've thrown paint at walls and put glue on things, and a long time ago, but I have done it. But I haven't done it with this iteration of environmental activism. I haven't really been involved with Extinction Rebellion. I've been along to a couple of demos. I've spoken at Extinction Rebellion families things. I've done stuff like that. But I kind of felt that my rebellion, such as it is, has been in my work, trying to convince people about the value of the natural world. But to a certain extent, I have
Trying.
felt that I failed, which
dear.
is kind of why I wrote this novel, because this novel is the most direct action that I've made in words, really.
I think this one, you lifted narrative non-fiction into a far better place than it was when I was a child, through your work. You educate, you inform. I remember the first time I heard you speak, and the way that you describe things, you can almost see the animal in front of you and listening. But I think the song that sings us is an utter heart song from you. And that is the difference. It's like you're not hiding behind anything. You're out, and this is why you were scared yesterday, because you put your heart on the line, and you hope that other people don't stamp on it. Really, and it makes you vulnerable.
It does make you vulnerable.
But I would say that all of your work has been an activism. I would say that you are part of the education of many of these young people who are out on the streets. Whether they know your name or not is irrelevant. They'll have formed their ideas through learning about the natural world, through your books at school and at home.
Maybe.
I would say really don't underestimate the impact that you've had. And when you look at young activists today, it's not come from a vacuum.
Yeah.
It's come from things that...
There's been a lot of people doing
from Peppa Pig.
I've got something. We're going to hear another reading in a moment, because I can't believe how the time is absolutely whizzing by. We do want that reading, but I just want to perhaps take a kind of left field approach for a moment and say, I'm going to make a comparison here between the song that sings us and his Dark Materials. Yeah. They're very different stories, of course, and I think the worldview in them is very different. But in terms of the scale of the drama, needing a big stage to tell the biggest story of humankind on this planet, I do think there are similarities. Can you see that connection, or do you think it's just a bonkers thought?
Can I answer that?
Well, yeah, you answer that, because I'm too close to it to judge, really.
I remember hearing the first parts of this and thinking to myself, I have not enjoyed listening to a story as much since Northern Lights. There is a similarity between the mind connection of the animals and the demons, but it is different, because Philip Pullman's demons are just extensions of humans. They're two sides of one being, whereas these animals are real. And the pace and the excitement is fantastic, and I love the Northern Lights and the Subtle Knife very much. But this, for me, it's the spaces between the words in this that almost sing to your own heart. They help you to realize things that you have known but not been able to put into words. I don't always think in words. I think a lot in images, but sometimes I'm not sure what it is. I have no words, like Zeno, for how my thoughts are. It's an understanding. It's a physical understanding of the world with your body. That's the easiest I can say it. Listening to this, reading this, the connections that it makes in the synapses in my head is just astonishing. And it doesn't preach.
I will say, I know this is about your book, Nicola, but I will say somebody else who has that capacity for me is SF Said. When I read something like Phoenix, he doesn't write that many books, but when he writes them, they're because they have that kind of connection. Anyway, do you know, there's no questions in the Q&A, and I know what that means. It doesn't mean that people have no questions. It means that they've been absolutely engrossed listening to both of you speaking.
We've all gone to make a cup of tea.
I'm pretty sure that's what that means. So I'm just going to say to the audience, because it is coming up to nearly 9 o'clock and we want to give Nicola and Jackie time to go and have some champagne before they have to be in bed this evening. So we're not going to run on and on and on. But what I'm going to say is that there is the chat facility. And if you do have a question, a thought, a reflection to leave for Nicola and Jackie, please use that, because we talked about this earlier, didn't we? I'm going to forward it to you. Okay. And Nicola's very kindly said that she will respond to things that you put in there. So please do use that. And I'm going to tell you how this event is coming to a close. I'm going to thank our speaker, well, Jackie and Nicola in a moment. And then Nicola is going to read another short piece for us from the book. And then I'm going to play some sounds, their humpback whale song, basically. And when the humpback whale song ends, that will be the end of our event. But it's about a minute, so it gives you some time if you do want to be thinking about something that you'd like to say to Jackie or Nicola. You've got time to formulate some thoughts and to write those. But to the thanks, it went too quickly. I will say that was not long enough. If you think about everything that we talked about earlier, and we just didn't have time to go there. We need a day with you two just to go to the places that you need to go. But you've at least kickstarted some of that conversation around the book for us. Do you know, I'm in awe of both of you. I can't say any more than that. I am in awe of both of you, amazing women. And thank you so much for being here this evening. Thank you to the audience too, who didn't get the chance to ask any questions. And thank you to Penny and to Firefly. Yeah, I'm going to ask Penny and myself, we'll turn our cameras off. We'll just let Nicola read. And then, as I say, I'm going straight to sounds after that. And that will be the end of the event. So thank you both very much.
Thank you, Nikki. You're such a star. Nobody understands books like you do. You're amazing. Sorry, we've got background cats.
I'm just going to go and rescue the cat.
So the little bit that I'm going to read is from late on in the book. And Harlan is in the water with humpback whales. I've spent a lot of time watching humpback whales. I've never been in the water with them, but I have been lucky enough to be on a boat in the middle of the night in the Caribbean, listening to them singing, the sound coming through the dark water. And I have to say, that was one of the top 10 minutes of my entire life. The water is cool and clear, deep as eternity. White flippers shine turquoise through the sea's prism as the whales turn like dancers in the water. They are singing. They're telling Harlan their old stories, the ones Harlan and Pa learned from them years ago. Harlan has a message for them, a message that she'd carried, kept safe in a dream since the day when they healed her heart and soul, and gave her this message to bring back to them. So Harlan sings the song she's always sung with Ma and Ash and Zeno, the song the whales sung into her when she was sick. And then she finds a new song rising in her throat. Even in her puny human voice, she feels its power. It is the signal to the whales, the sign that they have waited for, that says, now it's time to sing the great unmaking, the song to end the story of the automators and all they've done. the song to sing the world anew. The song bends time, then, now, and tomorrow, all tangle in its threads as it spreads, all in a single instance, to every place and every being in the world. It sings in voices, it sparks in glowing phosphorescence, it dances in the jumps of dolphins and the slow pulse of jellyfish. It twines in the tails of seahorses and blossoms in the spawning of corals. Albatrosses snatch it from the gleaming surface and spread it over waves to the cliffs of farthest islands. It washes onto the shore where limpets write it on the rocks. It's taken to the sky in clouds and sung in rain, passed through roots and leaves. It crackles in the fungal networks in all the secret darkness underground. It spreads fast as thought, quicker than a photon. It sings from throats and beaks in the forest morning when the air holds still, from burrows in the desert, under the aurora. It crosses mountain valleys, oceans, and echoes in the veins of leaves, in cells, and between one breath and the next. It trickles down the skin of elephants, so they know that we again exists, not only I. For a heartbeat, that's a lifetime. Every being shares the being of another and learns the wild, untamed meaning of one kin, one song. Thanks for coming.